They're looking for something in their life because of a particular crisis that happened.
I'm hoping to be able to walk the whole Camino.
And asked my husband, Paul, you search for meaning.
Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I'm your host Matthew Pejkovic and this is episode number 227. Releasing in Australian cinemas is Camino Skies, a documentary that chronicles the pilgrimage of 6 strangers as they take part in the Camino de Santiago, a 800-kilometre trek from France to Spain in which many find religious and spiritual growth. Joining me today to talk about Camino Skies is the film's co-director, Noel Smyth. Noel, thank you very much for joining me today on the podcast.
Hi, Matt. Thank you for having me.
So, this subject is really interesting to me. The first time I heard about the Camino de Santiago was a film called The Way, which was directed by Emilio Estevez. Came out several years back. And I'm just curious, when was the first time you heard about the Camino de Santiago and what really moved you to want to make a documentary about it?
I first heard of the Camino through my wife, who had actually walked it 10 years earlier. And, you know, before we met, and so the whole time we were dating, she kept telling me about this amazing experience she had on the Camino, and so that was the first time I'd heard of it. And then more recently, a couple of years ago, Fergus, who co-directed the film with me, he sort of said, what do you think about doing a documentary on the Camino de Santiago? And up until that point, I hadn't really thought about it since speaking about it with my wife. But the more we started thinking about it, and the more we talked about it, the more we realized that it would kind of just the perfect setting for a documentary and the types of stories that we want to tell, and which are, quite feature everyday sort of people doing extraordinary things, and people walk the Camino for all sorts of reasons, and we were just really curious about telling these very intimate stories against such an epic backdrop, such as the Camino, and such a this perfect self-contained journey for the film.
The Camino itself draws over 200,000 people a year to go through this pilgrimage. Your film focuses on 6 people, primarily from New Zealand and Australia. How did you find your 6 subjects that you wanted to work on? Did you know of them beforehand? Did you meet them while you were there on location? How did you come across to get these 6 people to not only work on your work with you on the documentary, but how did you even know of them in the first place?
Yeah, well, I think in a perfect world, if we had kind of much bigger budget and unlimited funding and time, we probably would have gone over to Spain and hung around and do the Camino multiple times to find our subjects. But because we were very much an independent, self-funded, sort of very, very small crew, we knew that we had to find our characters before we went. And so some of those came about through people that we knew from who were kind of big characters within the Camino community, such as Sue and Claude. And then we came across Terry's story from a newspaper article about the first time that he walked the Camino. And then through Terry, we met his son-in-law, Mark, who also had an incredible story and wanted to come on board and share it with us. And then the last 2, Julie and Cheryl, we found them we posted an ad in a travel company newsletter, and through that we had a bunch of people kind of get back to us. And in the ad, I think we just said, we're looking to film a documentary from this date to this date on the Camino de Santiago and on interesting characters, and find out, tell your story. And so we had a bunch of interest from that, and that led us to Julie and Cheryl. And and then I don't think we didn't tell the group much about what we were doing. We sort of just said, we want to go and follow your journey doing the Camino and see what happens. And so the first night, and we'd all sort of spoken on the phone, and there was a little Facebook group amongst us just to chat and talk about the logistic details. But other than that, we all arrived the day of or the night before we set off and had a dinner and kind of met each other for the first time properly there. And then the next day we set off and started filming.
As I mentioned in my introduction, the Camino is a pilgrimage, so there's a religious and spiritual aspect to it, and it's very personal for the people involved. A big subject in your documentary is that of grief. The majority of your subjects are dealing with grief in some way or another. When you first get in contact with the people in your film and you get to know them a little more, is it easier for you as a filmmaker, as an interviewer, to gain their trust and have them open up and talk about their stories on camera?
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's the big important factor in trying to tell these intimate stories is it's just time to get to know people, time for them to get to know you, to build up a bit of trust there, and just to make people feel comfortable enough that they know that you're not going to misrepresent them, or that you've also got their best interests at heart, and that's really, really important to us, because we do want to continue telling these very intimate stories, and you just can't do that if you don't have trust. And also something, another reason why we were really drawn to the Camino as well is that we knew we could tease out these really intimate stories and personal stories, just because the very nature of the whole journey and the filming process. We spent 42 days filming, 38 days with the subjects of the film, and so that was every day choose one person or two people to walk with that day and just have a chat, and so it was really casual. And something about walking, just, I don't know what it is, it makes people feel comfortable to really open up. It's sort of similar to when you're on a road trip with someone, and I think it's because you don't have the pressure of having to make eye contact. You can just sort of look ahead and do your own thing and get on with it, and you can open up and share these really personal stories. And that's what happened. And I was actually surprised that the subject, I think, opened up a lot earlier than I was expecting. I went into it thinking that the first couple of weeks would probably just be trust building and getting to know everyone, and that we wouldn't get anything really usable until maybe halfway through. But almost on the first or second day, people just started opening up and sharing their story, and then from there it just got better and better.
Throughout the journey, there are unique experiences that many of your subjects experience. There's this one story where Mark, who is there because he had lost his 17-year-old daughter to cystic fibrosis, and he was there to do this in her honor and also to raise money for charity and such. He was telling a story about he was struggling to climb a hill, and he was confronted by a wild dog, and the dog is almost urging him, pushing him forward, and he felt that it was almost a kind of divine intervention, at least on the part of his recently deceased daughter. And it's such a magical and such a unique kind of experience to share on film. Were there many stories like that throughout this journey? Did many people kind of experience these kind of almost supernatural things to them when they were walking the Camino?
Yeah, I don't know if it's so much supernatural, but a really common theme amongst the whole group was, and we had many discussions with everyone about it, was symbols and symbolism in life, and you know, whether you're looking for a symbol or a sign, and other times it just, you know, comes along and finds you, and so there would be many times, Mark and Julie especially, who were both kind of grieving recently lost loved ones, they would often talk about symbolism, and, you know, whether it was finding heart-shaped rocks along the way, or, you know, it could be just as simple as birds or butterflies, and you know, Claude also would tell us about stories of not knowing which direction to go, and, you know, a bird popping up on one path, and so she'd choose that one, and that would turn out that it was correct. So and yeah, so it did come up quite often, and the case for Mark, where we have that dog in the film, yeah, he was really struggling. It was the second day in, and it was some of the hardest terrain of the entire pilgrimage. It's really steep, and we had torrential rain the first 3 or 4 days. So everyone's soaked, everyone's down, and it's the very start of the trip. And Mark, as he sort of mentions in the film, and I won't give too much away, but he was ready to chuck in the towel then. And just seeing this dog, and it was a shaggy dog, and I was filming it. I was actually lucky enough to come up. I wasn't with Mark at the time. I came. I would have been maybe an hour behind Mark, and I saw the dog as well, and I thought, oh, I didn't know how it would get used, but I thought that's a really, you know, beautiful scene, very moody and cinematic, and so I just started rolling up and filming this dog, and then it turned out to be the dog that he came across, and that gave him the strength and the will to go on, and that was a bit of a turning point, even as early as it was a real turning point for Mark, because I don't think he had a day as hard as that.
So the 6 people in your documentary, they are going through spiritual, religious, personal experiences while on the Camino. But what about yourself and Fergus while you're filming this? You are also walking the track alongside these people. You're doing the same kilometers. Are you also affected by the power and significance of the journey? Or when making a film, does that distract you from what is happening around you?
Yeah, it's a tough one. Fergus and I have spoken about it a bunch of times, and because we were so caught up making the film, I'm not sure that we got the same experience. And I think for us, more the process of actually making and finishing the film has been our own kind of Camino. It's been the hardest, most difficult, most challenging thing we've ever done, but also the most rewarding thing we've ever done. And so that, coming away from that, the way we talk about the film is very similar to the way that people talk about their Caminos and what they got out of it, and they meet people and they learn about themselves. So I think we got that from the making of the film, but I'm not sure we got it from walking the Camino, and I'd love to walk it again just without a film to make, but just because we were so busy every single day, we were such a small crew. It was a crew of 3 people. Fergus and I were directing and producing. I was shooting it. Fergus was doing sound, and then we had an incredible young production assistant who would help and wherever she could, but we were still just a small team, and so every day would start with a pre-sunrise start most days, out onto the track, walking, trying to get the good light, and then walk through the day, get into the town in the afternoon, continue filming because we wanted to that was the other side of the Camino that we wanted to show, and really just staying with our characters to be ready as soon as anything happened, just to roll up camera. But what that meant was that by the time, the day ended and I would stay up copying files over to a computer and backing everything up, it meant our day wouldn't finish until about 1 a.m. and then we'd get up and do it all over again the next day. And that was pretty continuous for the 42 days, apart from we had one rest day in the middle somewhere.
The Camino itself is such a physical endurance. I mean, 800 kilometers. From what I remember from the film, everyone was trying to average around 20 to 25 kilometers a day. So you're looking anywhere between 30 to 32 days. So almost a month straight of walking. And that's a lot for even the most kind of high impact kind of, endurance kind of athlete kind of to undergo. One of your subjects, Susan, who was also one of the older people in your film, she was suffering from ailments even before she began the journey. She had a crooked back, bad legs and everything. And every person goes through their own journey, and she had her own motivations behind what she wanted to do. But, it was hard to watch her kind of go through this. She breaks down quite a bit, and there's just the pain and the toll that she kind of felt. Myself as an audience member, you felt it too. Whereas you're there documenting her journey in particular, especially the physical difficulties that she was having. Was there any concern on behalf of yourself and Fergus to try, and I know as a documentarian you're there to document and not to interfere, but considering the physical endurance that she had to go through, I'm sure a lot of people were perhaps asking Susan to not press ahead and not to go through any more kind of pain on this journey.
Look, Sue is one of the most inspirational people I've ever met. She every day she would get up and walk through it, and every day she would be in pain, and we made it, really clear up front that if anybody needed to take a rest or drop out or do whatever they had to do, that's totally their call, and that we were there, like we hoped that everyone would be able to finish it and be with us at the finish line. But of course, if people's health has to come first. And with Sue, it was just inspiring watching her every single day. Like the stuff you see on the film hopefully conveys it, but every day she would be in pain, and she just continued to walk through it every day, and then she'd have to take the odd bus or taxi here and there. And on those days, she would get really down because she sort of set these own personal goals for her, and I think for Sue, she's just such an avid lover of the outdoors and walking that for her it's painful to coming to terms with the thought of losing that, which she slowly is. So that was her story. That was what she was grieving, was the loss of her physical ability.
Throughout the film, it wasn't a dominant theme, but there was kind of like a low-key kind of debate about people who, when they do the Camino, they might catch that taxi or might catch that bus. For Susan, it's totally understandable as to why. For some others, maybe not so much. Was there a lot of that happening throughout? Did you see a lot of pilgrims kind of just call time out and use other alternate means to get across this trek? And what was some of the people's reaction to that? I know, like when I was watching it, I thought to myself, it kind of takes away from the experience of pilgrimage, but then again, I'm not there doing 25 kilometers a day and going through all the stuff that a lot of these people are going through.
Yeah, it's definitely a bit of a controversial thing on the Camino. You've got the hardcore Camino peregrinos who are very rigid in saying that, you have to walk every single moment, every mile, every kilometer on your own. And but for me, I don't know. I think Camino is what is your own thing. It's your own challenge. And for Sue, even though she did have to take a taxi and take buses, she put her absolute everything into it. And I'm sure if she had more time, she probably would have just taken a few days off and then continued walking. But we didn't sort of have that luxury to do that. So she had to skip ahead a couple of days. But it is funny. I don't know. A lot of people do catch taxis where they have to, and a lot of people are on a timeline. You know, a lot of people kind of do the Camino on their holidays, and so we came across lots of people from other countries who would maybe only have a week or two holiday from work, and so they'd come over and do the Camino in stages, and do a week here and then pick it up the next year. But yeah, I think people set their own challenges, and it's a very personal thing, and that if you're happy with what you've achieved, then that's kind of all that matters.
As I mentioned in my first question, the Camino is something that's been on my mind for a while, ever since I saw it on the cinema screen. And back then I made a promise to myself that before I hit 40, I would do it. Now, 40 is 2 years away from me, Noel. And so I guess I should start preparing. So you've walked it, you've seen other people walk it. What advice would you give to someone who is looking to do the Camino de Santiago? Would you recommend more in the way of physical exercise, more spiritual exercise? What is it that you would suggest people really, really put their work into before even commencing to set one foot on that path?
It's a good question. A lot of people say that that you don't need to train for the Camino, because the first week is going to be your training. The first week is always hard. You're always working through the blisters and the getting used to that daily grind and the grueling nature of it. So whether you can do as much training as you want. I personally did a lot of training for it. But partly that was because I knew that I was going to have to carry my camera and then my backpack full of batteries and the rest of camera gear. And so I needed to make sure that I could keep up with everyone and also be backtracking between people, because that's what we ended up doing through the days. And so I did a lot of training for it. But I would recommend that people do train for it, just because it's grueling, and you are walking every single day, which is what makes it so incredible. But probably the best advice I'd give to people is just try and not do it without a timeline, or make sure that you have enough time to do it, to take your time with it, so you're not rushing. Because the main, where people get hurt is when they can't stop for a rest day, or when they're trying to keep up a pace that isn't right for them. So I would just give it as much time as it needs, if you've got that luxury, or as much time as you can anyway. And also it's a nicer experience being able to take your time with it. I think you would also mentally and spiritually get a lot more out of it if you're not rushing, if you're not thinking about, I need to hit my 20k mark today, or my 30k mark.
So just like life, treat it as an experience and less like a race.
Exactly, 100%. And it gives you time to enjoy those moments. You come across such incredible little towns, and you meet locals, or you meet other peregrinos on the way, and you want to have that time to be able to, come across a nice town, and maybe I'll stay here for an extra day and hang about and see what, go exploring. It shouldn't be a race. Definitely like life. Shouldn't be a race. Just take your time with it.
So for everyone out there listening, this Thursday, it's Camino Skies documentary coming out in Australian screens. Look, Noel, I just want to say once again, congratulations to yourself and to Fergus as well. You guys put together a wonderful documentary, and I'm going to take your advice on. Hopefully I will do it before I hit 40. But like we said before, let's just see how the experience takes me even before that timeline comes across. So I thank you once again for joining me on the podcast, and once again, congratulations with your film.
Thank you very much, Matt, and thank you for listening. And we also have the film's got its premiere in Sydney on Wednesday, the 31st, the Hayden...
the Hayden Orpheum?
Hayden Orpheum, yes, Hayden Orpheum Picture Palace.
Excellent. So everyone out there, please do check out this film. Noel, thank you very much for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you.